Unity is one of the biggest game engines in the world, but after some decisions they made, it doesn't seem like that will remain the case very long. This video will be going over everything surrounding Unity, the backlash, how it almost ruined the last game jam I was a part of, and what the future looks like for this engine. The year was 2005. Unity had just released during the Apple Worldwide Developer Conference. It was a new game engine developed for Mac to allow independent developers to start creating games for Apple. The next year, it got runner-up in Apple's Design Awards for the category of Best Use of Graphics. But Unity was making strides. 2007, 2010, 2012, 2017, Unity released new iterative versions of their engine, adding in new features each update. And they didn't just stop at development for Apple, they extended their reach to more platforms: Android, Windows, Linux, websites, WebGL, and even consoles like PlayStation, Switch, and Xbox. Unity grew to capture 38% of the game engine market space, and huge announcements continue to make Unity grow in popularity. They began working on Gigaya, a fully featured first-party puzzle platforming game that Unity planned on releasing for free as a guide to how to properly implement features in Unity for your own projects. They also started development on a new data-oriented tech stack, or DOTS, to massively improve performance using multi-threading. Unity could not lose. Unity made some big changes to their game engine, and it got people mad. Even if you're not in the game development space, you probably heard about the backlash. People from all over the world were denouncing Unity for their actions. A lot of developers were saying how they were going to switch to other game engines, and prominent gaming figures were also sharing their thoughts about the awful decision Unity made.
So Unity, which is a cross-platform engine provider here for the software space, is seeing a little bit of a move to the downside here today.
To understand what happened, I think it's important to understand John Riccitiello, the CEO behind Unity. John went to UC Berkeley and studied business. One of his first jobs out of college was working as a brand manager at Clorox. Yeah, this Clorox. He eventually made his way through a couple notable food brands, Pepsi Cola and Haagen-Dazs, working in marketing and development, but he didn't start as CEO until 1993 when he filled the position of president and CEO of Wilson Sporting Goods. And more famously, John eventually became the CEO of the now multi-billion-dollar video game company, Electronic Arts. This was before all the decisions were made to add microtransactions to every button press in EA games. All those decisions were made around the early 2010s, and John actually left EA after 6 years in 2004. EA was actually voted the worst company 2 years in a row by the consumerists in 2012. But this isn't about that CEO, we're talking about John. Why did John leave EA in 2004? Well, during that time, he actually left in pretty good standings and wanted to start an equity firm with a bunch of other notable people. During this time, John and the rest of the partners actually invested into BioWare and Pandemic Studios. BioWare in specific creating really big IPs like Dragon Age and Mass Effect. John and the firm probably made a good chunk of change because in 2007, both BioWare and Pandemic Studios got bought out by EA. EA bought both for $860 million. So I think it's pretty safe to say that John and the new CEO of EA had a pretty good working relationship. We mentioned him a couple times, but I actually don't know who took over the new CEO position at EA in 2007. Hold on, let me look it up. I mean, whoever it was messed up pretty bad to quit the way they did. Also voted worst company 2 years in a row. That's wild. Give me a second. I'm still looking it up. It was John. John went back to work at EA and bought the companies he invested in, giving himself a new job and a pretty big paycheck. During his more recent stint at EA, it seemed like the company was getting beat down hit after hit. 2008, they cut 11% of their workforce. John also gave a speech in the DICE Summit talking about their recent business practice to try to buy studios and incorporate them into EA, saying, "There was a fundamental belief that we could be one happy family. We had a top-down approach to development. We at EA blew it. I would say I blew it." 2009, they had another set of layoffs, now even larger, with 1,500 employees losing their jobs. 2011, John got in a bunch of hot water because of a leaked meeting where he was talking about monetization in video games to his shareholders. He was talking about how people are more susceptible to purchases when they have a large time investment into the game they're playing.
When you are 6 hours goes into playing Battlefield and you run out of ammo and we ask you for $1 to reload, you're really not very price sensitive at that point. And then when they're deep into the game, they're well invested in it. We're not gouging, but we're charging. And at that point in time, the commitment can be pretty high.
This all culminated in 2013, where John eventually quit, leaving EA with an open letter. My decision to leave EA is really all about my accountability for the shortcomings in our financial results this year. We have fallen short of the internal operating plan we set 1 year ago, and for that, I am 100% accountable. The following year, John became the CEO of Unity, and that leads up to now. For a long time, Unity continued to make strides under John's leadership, but not everything has gone well. Remember Gigaya? That project ended up being cancelled. Dots, which was announced in 2019, had no news for nearly the past 4 years. This was supposed to be a game-changing addition to the Unity engine, and in 4 years, nothing had been done. Public relations with Unity and the community ended up taking a hit back in 2022 as well, when John gave an interview and he talked about some developers not giving thought to monetization early in their product's development, where he said Ferrari and some of the other high-end car manufacturers still use clay and carving knives. It's a very small portion of the gaming industry that works that way, and some of these people are my favorite people in the world to fight with. They're the most beautiful and pure, brilliant people. They're also some of the biggest idiots. The CEO of the game engine you use calling you a idiot for not implementing monetization into your game surprisingly ended up not going too well, but that wasn't what got everyone upset.
But I still think that a lot of people right now cannot trust Unity anymore. I think Unity basically just punched himself in the face.
The controversy that happened was about something worse. It was about money. When you're running a business and you're trying to make money from the video games you create and people start to mess with your money, there's going to be huge waves. September 12th, Unity released a blog post announcing a change to their pricing structure. Their plan was to implement the new pricing structure January 1st, 2024. They would be charging a fee every time someone installs your game. The Unity Personal and Plus plans would charge 20 cents per install, where Pro and Enterprise plans would have reduced rates. There would be a $200,000 and $200,000 install threshold over a 12-month period in order for these fees to kick in. Pro and Enterprise plans would also have a higher threshold to hit before they would start being charged, with both thresholds being raised to $1 million. A thing that is also important to note is that the Unity Personal plan is the only plan that is free, so the other plans all have a monthly fee on top of this new proposed fee. When these changes were announced, some developers behind the biggest mobile games like Among Us and Slay the Spire criticized the changes. There were even death threats sent to Unity. The feds were called and Unity had to evacuate 2 of their offices. A San Francisco police spokesperson told The Standard the threat was allegedly made by a Unity employee who was out of state and that they were unable to reach outside jurisdiction to make a report. A 20-cent charge doesn't sound like a huge deal, and maybe it wouldn't be if it was charged per sale. Maybe I could see some problems with that as well, but the problem was that it was a 20-cent fee per install. So every time someone would install your game, you would be charged 20 cents. This essentially gave everyone the tool to bankrupt your company just by installing and uninstalling your game. If your game cost $1, like most mobile games cost, someone would have to reinstall your game 5 times for that sale to be worth nothing, before taxes and fees got taken out. I made a quick video talking about a bunch of reasons why this sort of fee doesn't make sense. Unity's response? They said that only 10% of developers would be affected by this. I don't know about other developers, but my goal isn't to make a little bit of money with games. I want to make a lot of money. And putting on a soft cap that feels like a hard cap on profits I could possibly make, it doesn't inspire a lot of motivation to use your engine. But if we ignore that cap, 10% is still a lot of games. Thousands of developers and games would be affected by this change, basically putting a large portion of the gaming industry out of business. That brings us to this jam, the Jump Ship Jam. A lot of people chimed in, and a couple of these figures were Barji and Polymars. A couple of game dev YouTubers decided they would host a game jam in opposition to Unity's decisions. What's a game jam? A game jam is a community event where a bunch of developers get together to make a game in a short period of time. You can make a game solo or join a team, and usually there's a theme that you have to follow for the jam, or rules. This jam was no different. The theme for the jam was strength in numbers. The name of this jam was the Jump Ship Jam, and just like the name suggests, it was a sort of protest against Unity, and you were meant to use a new engine or tool to create your game for the jam. Guess who joined the jam? It was me. I joined the largest team I've ever been a part of for this game, the jam that was created to display solidarity amongst Unity developers. It wasn't until later that I found out that this jam was a month long. A month to make a game may seem like a really short amount of time, but most jams I've joined up until this point had been around a week. So a month-long jam was a big step for me personally. The first day we all jumped on a call, and when the theme was announced, we all started pitching ideas, and we didn't have a solid idea yet. The first week we spent getting everyone set up and finalizing what the idea for our game was. I was going to be programming and also work on the UI for the game, and since we were meant to be using a new engine or tool, we decided, just like many other developers, that we would be using Godot. Godot is another game engine, but with a fundamentally different approach to their business. Unity is a publicly traded business that has a board and CEO and shareholders. Godot is not. Godot is a free engine that is also open source. If you don't know what that means, open source means that the code that is used to create the engine is free and publicly available for anyone to modify or use. If you wanted to see, and I do mean just see, the Unity source code, you would have to contact Unity and ask them to set you up with a plan for that capability. You cannot just sign up for it on their site, you have to get in contact, and even then, you wouldn't be able to change it. And you would also have to pay. How much? I actually don't know. You would have to contact Unity to get that information. Just to be clear, this is how most game engines have ran their business in the past. Godot is an exception, and for obvious reasons, I think you can understand why a lot of people are more open to trusting a product like Godot. But this free and open source model is starting to grow in popularity, and probably the most successful iteration of this model is Blender. Blender is a 3D software, so not strictly intended for game development, but it's free and open source, and it's been growing a lot over the past few decades. People are really into Godot for this reason, and with all the Unity drama, you know we're using Godot. But there's a major problem. I don't think anyone on the team has ever used Godot, and Godot has its own programming language. So on top of learning a new engine and its UI and intricacies, we also have to learn a new programming language. It's a big hurdle for the project, and it's probably the reason why the jam was a month long, but we all knew this going into the jam, so it wasn't a surprise to us at all. So the rest of the team and I got everything set up, and while we were getting our ideas pinned down, I started working on some simple tasks. But then disaster struck. Or not really disaster, but a major setback. I had been working on a simple camera mechanic, I got it working, and then people started adding in their own work to the project. And when I tried to reopen the project, the game just wouldn't run. Strictly speaking, if you're programming a game, it's not necessary to be able to run the game, but it's sort of like painting a picture with a blindfold on. I had no clue why this happened, and the rest of the team didn't seem to be having this issue. So I spent an entire day trying to troubleshoot. I couldn't figure out what had changed, and I asked for help. I got a couple of suggestions from the team, but nothing helped. I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of ghosted after asking for help, but you know, everyone is new to the engine, so I guess it's understandable why I didn't get much support. But after trying to figure out what the issue was for another day, I eventually gave up. I told the team I wasn't going to contribute as a programmer anymore. And I never figured out what the issue was until near the end of the jam. The problem had to do with some communication errors, and with Godot itself. Like I mentioned before, Godot has its own programming language. However, Godot also has support for C#. C# is another programming language, and for reference, most of us were switching from Unity to Godot for this project, and Unity uses C# as its programming language. So during our initial discussions, we were talking about the possibility of using C# for this project, and it was my understanding that we landed on trying to use Godot's language, but we were probably going to end up using C# for the majority of the project. My understanding and everyone else's understanding didn't line up. That was a bit of a problem, but the thing that really sunk it for me was that Godot actually has two different versions, one that supports the C# language and one that doesn't. I downloaded the one that supports the C# language because that's the one I thought we were all going to use. And that's why when other people added their changes, it didn't work on my computer, but it only didn't work on my computer. My mistake, but No Host and Hollow both did a lot of work on the programming side for the game. I was feeling discouraged and we still didn't have a solid foundation for what the game actually was. This was the largest team I had ever been a part of for a jam, and a bigger team may sound like more things would get done, but I think it led to more confusion than anything else.
it was pretty chaotic and I didn't really understand what was happening.
But the music people, the art people, the two programmers kept pushing through the confusion. There were messages popping up and people were working, and I was there twiddling my thumbs. The jam was almost over and I felt like I hadn't contributed anything. I wrote 2 lines of code and added a camera, and I started research for implementing audio, but I didn't really do much. A few days before the jam ended, I got on the call with no host and I said just that. I didn't want to finish this game jam without doing anything, so we went through the almost finished game together and we went over user interface items that needed to be designed. After that, I got more of a push of motivation and I started working on designs for the things we talked about. I didn't manage to get through everything, but I got through the most important things, and I also set up the itch page for our submission. We ended up finishing the project in time and got our game submitted, and around the middle of the jam, Unity announced that they were adjusting their plan to have a straight 5% royalty after a threshold with an option for a lower initial install rate if it's cheaper for you. After the jam ended, we actually ended up being the #1 most voted game in the jam. We had 27 ratings, and our highest category was theme interpretation, where we ranked 8th. We also got 22nd place overall out of 81 entries, so we didn't do terribly. Also, huge news was that John Riccitiello stepped down as CEO of Unity. Unfortunately, part of his legacy left some people without a job. During John's tenure, he bought Weta Digital, the people behind the Planet of the Apes movie. Why exactly a video game company bought a special effects development studio focused on movies is beyond me. Shutting down this part of Unity will cause 265 workers to lose their jobs, and while that's obviously a bad thing, this move is giving Unity the opportunity to refocus back to its gaming roots. Unity's stock price has also increased since the release of this news, and it seems like some developers are willing to give Unity another chance, but the new long-term CEO will have to continue making improvements to see Unity grow back to its former glory. This has been the entirety of the whole Unity debacle. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll catch you next time.